The pregnancy test slips from Lyra's trembling fingers, clattering onto the cold marble floor of her father's study as his amber eyes, glowing with barely contained wolf fury, bore into her soul. Pregnant. Beta Marcus Blackwood's voice cuts through the silence like a blade. The word hangs in the air between them, heavy with judgment and disgust. Tell me this is some sick joke, Lyra. But the two pink lines on the white plastic stick tell a different story, one that makes her father's jaw clench so tight she can hear his teeth grinding. The scent of his rage fills the room, sharp, metallic, dangerous. Who? The single word drops from his lips like a death sentence. Lyra's hand moves instinctively to her still flat stomach. His name was. Marcus steps forward, and Lyra instinctively backs against the mahogany bookshelf. Books about pack hierarchy and werewolf law mock her from their neat rows. Don't tell me. He's gone. The words taste like ash in her mouth. He was a rogue, and he left. The sound that tears from her father's throat is pure wolf, a growl that makes every instinct in her body scream submit. His eyes flash from amber to gold to something darker, more primal. A rogue. He says it like a curse word. My daughter, the Beta's heir, bred by some nameless piece of trash who couldn't even stick around to face the consequences. Father, please. Do you have any idea what you've done? Marcus slams his fist on his desk, sending papers scattering like frightened birds. The shame you brought on this family? On this pack? I've spent 20 years building our reputation, our standing with Alpha Morrison, and you, he points at her with a shaking finger. You destroy it all for what? A night with some worthless rogue? Tears burn behind Lyra's eyes, but she refuses to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like what? You weren't thinking with your hormones instead of your head? You weren't spreading your legs for the first smooth-talking wolf who showed you attention? The cruelty in his words hits her like a physical blow. This is her father, the man who taught her to hunt, who braided her hair when she was small, who used to call her his little moonbeam. Now he looks at her like she's something he'd scrape off his shoe. I thought I loved him, she whispers. Marcus laughs, and it's the ugliest sound she's ever heard. Love. Listen to yourself. You're 19 years old, Lyra. You don't know what love is. What you know is how to ruin everything I've worked for. He turns away from her, staring out the tall windows that overlook the Crimson Moon territory. In the distance, pack members go about their evening routines, blissfully unaware that their Beta's world is crashing down around his ears. Alpha Morrison was considering you for his son's mate, Marcus says quietly. Did you know that? James Morrison, future alpha of one of the most powerful packs in the Eastern Territories. You could have been a Luna, Lyra. You could have united our packs, strengthened our bloodlines. I never wanted. What you wanted stopped mattering the moment you opened your legs for that rogue. He spins back to face her, and his expression is colder than winter moonlight. James Morrison will not take soiled goods as his mate. No respectable wolf will. You've made yourself worthless. The word hits her like a slap. Worthless. She presses her back harder against the bookshelf, wishing she could disappear into the leather-bound volumes. But worthless doesn't mean useless, Marcus continues, and something in his tone makes her blood run cold. There are still ways to salvage something from this disaster. Ways to ensure you pay for what you've done while serving a purpose. What are you talking about? Marcus moves to his desk, pulling out a thick folder. The Crimson Moon seal glints on the cover in deep red wax. There's a debt to be paid, daughter. And you're going to pay it. He opens the folder, and Lyra catches sight of official documents, contracts written in the formal language of pack law. Her father's handwriting is scrawled across several pages. The Ravencrest pack has requested servants, Marcus says, his voice businesslike now. Strong young wolves to work in their territory. The compensation is substantial. Servants? The word comes out as a croak. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. He looks up at her, and there's no trace of the man who once tucked her into bed with stories of brave wolves and happy endings. You want to act like a common whore? Then you can work like one. I won't go. The words come out stronger than she feels. I'm your daughter. You can't just. You stopped being my daughter the moment you disgraced our family name. Marcus's voice is flat, final. As of tonight, you're stripped of your rank, your title, your place in this pack. You have no name, no standing, no rights. The room spins around her. This can't be happening. Fathers don't do this to their children. Betas don't sell their own blood to other packs like livestock. But the papers in his hand say otherwise. The Ravencrest pack, she whispers, trying to remember what she knows about them. They're far north, isolated, powerful. And they're alpha. Darius Ravencrest, Marcus confirms. They call him the Ghost Wolf. Hasn't been seen by his own pack in 5 years, but his reputation precedes him. They say he's unforgiving to those who disappoint him. A shiver runs down her spine that has nothing to do with the cold marble floor beneath her feet. You'll serve in his household, Marcus continues. Clean his floors, tend his fires, whatever he requires. Maybe the work will teach you the value of the life you threw away so carelessly. And my baby? For the first time, something that might be regret flickers across his face. But it's gone so quickly she might have imagined it. That's not my concern anymore. The finality in his voice breaks something inside her chest. She slides down the bookshelf until she's sitting on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, the pregnancy test lying forgotten beside her. When? Her voice is barely a whisper. Tonight. The transport leaves at midnight. 3 hours. She has 3 hours before her entire life disappears. Can I say goodbye to Mother? Marcus turns back to the window. Your mother died of shame the moment I told her. She doesn't want to see you. The lies come so easily to him now. But Lyra knows her mother, gentle, loving Elena who always smelled like lavender and baking bread. She would never turn her back on her own daughter. Which means Marcus has already made sure they won't have the chance for goodbyes. Pack light, he says without turning around. You won't need much where you're going. Lyra pushes herself to her feet, her legs shaky. She walks toward the door on unsteady feet, but his voice stops her. Lyra. She turns back, some foolish part of her hoping he's changed his mind, that the father she remembers is still somewhere inside this cold stranger. Don't expect mercy from Darius Ravencrest, Marcus says quietly. I'm told he has little patience for mistakes. The door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds like a death knell. 3 hours later, Lyra sits in the back of a dark SUV, her few belongings in a worn duffel bag beside her. The driver, a silent, scarred wolf she doesn't recognize, hasn't spoken a word since picking her up. Through the tinted windows, she watches the familiar territories of her childhood disappear into darkness. Her hand rests on her stomach, over the tiny life growing inside her. It's just you and me now, she whispers. The SUV turns onto a narrow mountain road, climbing higher into territories she's never seen. The trees grow thicker, darker, older. This is ancient wolf land, the kind of place where legends are born and nightmares take root. Hours pass. The sky begins to lighten with the first hints of dawn when they finally stop before massive iron gates. The Ravencrest crest, a wolf's head surrounded by thorns, is worked into the metal with intricate detail. Beyond the gates, a sprawling estate rises from the mist like something out of a Gothic novel. Dark stone walls, towers that disappear into low-hanging clouds, windows that stare down like cold eyes. It looks less like a home and more like a fortress built to keep the world out. Or to keep something in. The driver rolls down his window, speaking in low tones to guards she can't see clearly. The gates swing open with a groan that sounds almost alive, and they drive through into another world. The driveway curves through ancient oaks that seem to whisper secrets in languages she doesn't understand. Wolves watch from the shadows between the trees, pack members, she realizes, but they don't look like any wolves she's ever seen. They're bigger, wilder, with eyes that reflect the early morning light like mirrors. The SUV stops in front of the main entrance, massive double doors carved with scenes of hunts and battles. A woman emerges from the shadows of the doorway. She's older, maybe 50, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes like winter storms. "Out," the driver says. His first word of the entire journey. Lyra climbs from the SUV on shaking legs, clutching her duffel bag. The mountain air is thin and cold, carrying scents she doesn't recognize, pine and stone and something else. Something that makes her wolf stir uneasily inside her. "Lyra Blackwood," the woman says. It's not a question. "I am Mrs. Hartwell, head of the household staff. You will answer to me." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Hartwell's cold gaze travels over Lyra's face, down to her still-hidden pregnancy, back up to meet her eyes. "You're here because of your father's debts and your own poor choices. Don't expect pity. Don't expect special treatment. You work, you obey, you stay out of trouble." "I understand. Do you?" Mrs. Hartwell steps closer, and Lyra catches her scent. Old wolf, powerful, dangerous despite her human appearance. "This isn't your father's pack, girl. This is Ravencrest territory. We have our own rules here, our own ways. Step out of line, and you'll learn exactly why wolves whisper our alpha's name in fear." The SUV pulls away, taking with it her last connection to everything she's ever known. She's alone now, truly alone, in a place that feels like the edge of the world. "Welcome to your new life," Mrs. Hartwell says, and turns toward the looming doors. "Try not to disappoint. The alpha doesn't suffer fools gladly." As they walk through the entrance into shadows that seem to swallow the morning light, Lyra can't shake the feeling that something is watching her from the darkness above. Something patient, predatory, and very much aware of her presence. She presses her hand to her stomach and follows Mrs. Hartwell into the house of the ghost wolf, heavy with child and completely powerless. Chapter 2. The servants' quarters in the east wing of Ravencrest Manor felt like a tomb. Lyra pressed her palm against the cold stone wall, counting the days since her arrival. 14. 14 days of scrubbing floors until her knees bled through her worn clothes, 14 nights of listening to sounds that made her wolf whimper and hide deeper inside her chest. "Girl." Mrs. Hartwell's voice cracked like a whip down the narrow hallway. "The morning rooms won't clean themselves." Lyra pushed herself off the wall, ignoring the dizzy spell that made the corridor tilt sideways. The morning sickness had gotten worse, not better, and she'd been keeping down maybe one meal a day. But complaining would only earn her more work, more contempt from the woman who seemed to take personal pleasure in making her life miserable. "Coming, ma'am," she called, grabbing the bucket of cleaning supplies from her cramped room. The other servants barely looked at her as she passed. There were maybe 20 of them in total, mostly Omegas and a few low-ranking Betas who'd fallen from grace in their own packs. They moved through the halls like ghosts, speaking in whispers, always glancing over their shoulders as if afraid of being overheard. "You're new." The voice belonged to a girl about Lyra's age, with mousy brown hair and nervous eyes. She was polishing silver in the main dining hall, her movements quick and efficient. "I'm Sarah." "Lyra." She knelt beside the massive fireplace, beginning the tedious process of scrubbing away yesterday's ashes. "How long have you been here?" Sarah glanced around before answering, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 2 years. Came here when my pack dissolved. Not many places take in strays. What's he like? The alpha? Lyra had been dying to ask someone, anyone, about the mysterious Darius Ravencrest. In 2 weeks, she hadn't caught so much as a glimpse of the man who supposedly ruled this place. The silver candlestick slipped from Sarah's hands, clattering onto the polished table. "We don't talk about him," she said quickly, her face going pale. "Mrs. Hartwell says." "Mrs. Hartwell says what, exactly?" The older woman's voice cut through the room like ice, and both girls jumped. She stood in the doorway, her steel-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. "I hope you're not filling the new girl's head with nonsense, Sarah." "No, ma'am," Sarah stammered. "We were just gossiping when you should be working." Mrs. Hartwell's cold eyes fixed on Lyra. "The Alpha's business is not your concern, girl. Your concern is keeping this manor spotless and staying out of trouble. Speaking of which, when you're finished here, the gardens need attention. The hedges are overgrown." Lyra bit back a groan. The gardens were a nightmare of neglected flowerbeds and wild growth that seemed designed to test her endurance. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hartwell's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. "You look pale. Are you eating?" The question caught Lyra off guard. It was the first time anyone in this place had shown even a flicker of concern for her well-being. Yes, ma'am. See that you do. Weak servants are useless servants." With that, she swept from the room, leaving behind the scent of disapproval and something else, something that smelled almost like worry. Sarah waited until the sound of heels clicking on marble faded completely before speaking again. "She's not as heartless as she pretends," she whispered. "But she's terrified of him. We all are. Terrified of an alpha who never shows his face? That's exactly why we're terrified." Sarah picked up the fallen candlestick with shaking hands. "You want to know what I think? I think something happened to him. Something bad. They say he used to be different. Before." "Before what?" Sarah's eyes darted to the tall windows that looked out over the grounds. "Before the screaming started." A chill ran down Lyra's spine. "Screaming? At night? Coming from the North Tower? That's where his rooms are, though nobody's been up there in years." "Sometimes." Sarah leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Sometimes it doesn't sound human." Before Lyra could ask more questions, another servant bustled into the room, an older woman with worried eyes and flour-stained apron. "Sarah, Mrs. Hartwell wants you in the kitchens," she said breathlessly. "And you," she looked at Lyra, "best get to those gardens before she comes looking for you again." The gardens stretched out behind the manor like a forgotten kingdom. What had once been formal flower beds now grew wild and untamed, roses climbing over stone walls and thorny tangles, hedges grown so tall they formed maze-like corridors. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't so overwhelming. Lyra had been working for maybe an hour when the cramping started. At first, she dismissed it as normal pregnancy discomfort, her body stretching and changing to accommodate the life growing inside her. But as the morning wore on, the pain intensified, spreading from her lower back around to her abdomen in waves that left her breathless. She was kneeling beside an overgrown rose bush, trying to prune away the dead wood, when a particularly sharp cramp doubled her over. The garden shears fell from her hands as she clutched her stomach, gasping. "Not now," she whispered to the baby she couldn't yet feel move. "Please, not now." When the pain subsided, she forced herself back to work. But her hands were shaking, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool mountain air. She needed help, medical attention, at the very least someone to tell her this was normal. But who could she ask? Mrs. Hartwell would probably accuse her of making excuses to avoid work. "You don't look well." The deep voice came from behind her, and Lyra spun around so quickly she nearly lost her balance. A man stood at the edge of the garden, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a dark sweater, but there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of authority. "I'm sorry," Lyra said quickly, struggling to her feet. "I didn't hear you approach." I'm working on the gardens like Mrs. Hartwell asked." He stepped closer, and she caught his scent, pine and leather and something wild that made her wolf stir with interest. "You're the new girl. From the Crimson Moon Pack." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Yes, sir. Marcus." He studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I'm the beta here." Lyra's heart jumped. This was Marcus, the man who supposedly spoke for the invisible Alpha, who carried out his orders and enforced his will. She'd expected someone older, crueler. This man looked to be in his 30s, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the deep lines of worry etched around his eyes. "Beta Marcus," she said, dropping her gaze respectfully. "I apologize if my work isn't up to standard. I'm still learning. Your work is fine." His voice was gentler than she'd expected. "I'm concerned about your health." Another cramp hit her, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't completely hide her wince. Marcus was beside her in an instant, his hand steady on her elbow. "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" he asked quietly. Lyra's throat tightened. "Not since I found out about the pregnancy. My father, he didn't. I was sent here so quickly." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How far along are you?" "About 3 months, I think." She pressed a hand to her stomach, where the cramping was starting again. "Is it normal to hurt this much?" "I don't know anything about. I never expected to be doing this alone." Something in Marcus's expression softened. "No," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be doing this alone." He looked around the overgrown garden, then back at her pale face. "Come with me." "But Mrs. Hartwell said." "Mrs. Hartwell answers to me, and I answer to the Alpha. And right now, the Alpha's priority is making sure his guests are properly cared for." He led her through corridors she'd never seen before, past paintings of long-dead Ravencrest wolves and windows that looked out over the wild mountain landscape. They stopped at a door marked with a small brass plaque, "Dr. Elena Winters, Pack Physician." "Elena's been with this pack for 15 years, Marcus explained, knocking softly. "She's delivered more babies than you can count." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She took one look at Lyra's pale face and stepped aside. "Bring her in," Dr. Winters said briskly. "From the look of her, this is overdue." The medical suite was warm and well-lit, a stark contrast to the cold stone corridors of the rest of the manor. Lyra found herself on an examination table while Dr. Winters took her blood pressure and asked gentle but thorough questions about her symptoms. "Cramping, nausea, fatigue," the doctor murmured, making notes on a chart. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Food makes me sick." "That's normal to a point, but you're dehydrated and undernourished." Dr. Winters turned to Marcus, who was standing near the door with his arms crossed. "She needs rest, proper nutrition, and prenatal vitamins. The physical labor isn't helping, especially not in her condition." "What condition?" Lyra asked, fear creeping into her voice. Dr. Winters sat down beside her, her expression gentle but serious. "You're carrying multiples, dear. Twins, possibly triplets. It's hard to tell this early without an ultrasound, but your hormone levels are much higher than they should be for a single pregnancy." The world tilted sideways. Twins. Maybe triplets. Lyra pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. One baby had seemed impossible enough. How was she supposed to raise multiple children as a servant in a pack that barely acknowledged her existence? "Hey." Marcus moved closer, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It's going to be okay." "How?" The word came out as a broken whisper. "How is any of this going to be okay? I'm alone, I have nothing, and now." "You're not alone," Marcus said firmly. "The Ravencrest pack takes care of its own, and that includes you now." Dr. Winters nodded. "I'll make sure you get the nutrition you need. And I'm prescribing modified duties. No more heavy lifting, no more working in the cold." "Mrs. Hartwell won't like that," Lyra said weakly. "Mrs. Hartwell will do as she's told," Marcus replied, and there was steel in his voice now. "The Alpha's orders." After Dr. Winters gave her prenatal vitamins and a list of foods that might help with the nausea, Marcus walked her back toward the servants' quarters. The corridors seemed less cold somehow, less threatening. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said as they walked. Marcus glanced at her. What? What happened to him? The Alpha. Everyone acts like he's some kind of ghost. Marcus stopped walking. For a long moment, he stared at a portrait on the wall, a man with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, handsome in a dangerous way. The brass nameplate read, Alpha Darius Ravencrest, 1995-2019. That's him, Marcus said quietly. Before what? Marcus was quiet for so long that Lyra thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, there was an attack. Rogues, but not ordinary ones. They'd been changed somehow. Made into something else. Something hungry and vicious and wrong. His hands clenched into fists. They came for the pack, but Darius, he fought them. All of them. Alone. What happened? He saved us all. But the cost? Marcus shook his head. Some prices are too high, even for an alpha. He's been different ever since. Changed. He doesn't trust himself around people anymore. They reached the servants' quarters, but Marcus didn't immediately leave. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression serious. I want you to know something, Lyra. You may be here because of your father's choices, but you're under the Alpha's protection now. That means something in this pack. If anyone gives you trouble, you come to me. Understood? She nodded, surprised by the fierce protectiveness in his voice. And one more thing, Marcus added. The Alpha, he knows about your situation. About the babies. He's not as absent as people think. With that cryptic statement, he left her standing in the corridor, more confused than ever. That night, Lyra lay in her narrow bed, one hand resting on her stomach. Twins, possibly triplets. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of determination settling in her chest. These babies would be born into difficult circumstances, but they would be born into the Ravencrest pack. And despite everything, the whispers, the mystery, the invisible Alpha, she was beginning to think that might not be such a terrible thing after all. Outside her window, a howl echoed across the mountains. Not the call of a normal wolf, but something deeper, more haunting. Something that spoke of loneliness and pain and a wildness that couldn't be contained. As she drifted off to sleep, Lyra could have sworn she saw a massive black shape moving through the trees at the edge of the grounds. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. The next morning, she woke to find a tray of food outside her door, fresh bread, fruit, a thermos of herbal tea that smelled like the remedies her mother used to make. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. But somehow, she knew. Thank you, she whispered to the empty hallway, and for the first time since arriving at Ravencrest Manor, she smiled. 3 days later, Mrs. Hartwell called her to the main office. The older woman sat behind a heavy oak desk, her expression unreadable. Your duties are being modified, she said without preamble. No more heavy cleaning, no more garden work. Dr. Winters spoke to you? Dr. Winters spoke to Beta Marcus, who spoke to the Alpha. Mrs. Hartwell's tone suggested she wasn't entirely pleased with this development. You'll be working in the library instead. Light dusting, organizing books. Nothing strenuous. Lyra blinked in surprise. The library was housed in the manor's west tower, far from the main activity of the house. It was practically a reward compared to scrubbing floors. Thank you, she said. Mrs. Hartwell studied her for a long moment. The Alpha takes a personal interest in pregnant pack members, she said finally. Don't read too much into it. But as Lyra made her way to the library that afternoon, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The West Tower was quiet, peaceful, filled with afternoon sunlight and the scent of old leather and parchment. Thousands of books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and comfortable reading chairs were scattered throughout. It was while she was dusting a high shelf that she found it, a book that had been left open on one of the tables. It was a medical text, open to a chapter on high-risk pregnancies and multiple births. Someone had been reading it recently. She could smell the faint lingering scent of pine and leather. Her heart began to race. Someone had been researching her condition. Someone who cared enough to want to understand what she was going through. That night, the food appeared again outside her door. This time, there was also a small bottle of prenatal massage oil and a note written in strong, masculine handwriting. For the aches. You're not alone. D***. Lyra pressed the note to her chest, tears pricking at her eyes. Darius. The invisible Alpha was watching over her, and somehow, that knowledge made everything else bearable. The howls still echoed through the night, lonely and haunting. But now, instead of frightening her, they sounded almost like a lullaby. A promise that someone was standing guard while she slept. And for the first time since leaving her father's house, Lyra felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Chapter 3. Blood pooled beneath Lyra as she collapsed among the roses, her scream piercing the mountain air like a blade through silk, and somewhere in the darkness of the manor, something ancient and powerful heard her cry and answered. The cramping had started that morning worse than ever, but Mrs. Hartwell had insisted the library books wouldn't dust themselves. Lyra had made it as far as the garden before her body betrayed her completely, doubling over as warm liquid ran down her legs. No, she gasped, pressing her hands to her swollen belly. At 6 months, it was too early. Far too early. Please, not yet. But her daughter had other plans. The world spun as another contraction tore through her, and she found herself on her knees among the thorns, crying out for help that wouldn't come. The other servants were inside, and the gardens were too far from the main house for anyone to hear her. Through the haze of pain, she heard something that made her blood freeze. The sound of massive paws thundering across the ground, coming fast. A wolf. Not just any wolf, but something enormous, something that moved with deadly purpose. She tried to crawl toward the manor, leaving a trail of blood on the stone path, but another contraction dropped her flat. That's when she saw it, a massive black wolf emerging from the tree line, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd ever seen. Its eyes glowed amber in the afternoon light, fixed on her with an intensity that should have terrified her. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of safety wash over her. The wolf shifted mid-stride, and suddenly a man knelt beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and scars that crossed his face like lightning. She tried to focus on his features, but the pain was making everything blur. Hold on, his voice was rough, urgent. I've got you. Strong arms lifted her, and she found herself pressed against a chest that smelled like pine and winter storms. My baby, she whispered. Both of you are going to be fine. His voice held absolute conviction. I promise. The world went dark. When Lyra woke, she wasn't in the servants' quarters. Silk sheets caressed her skin, and afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows draped in deep blue velvet. The bed she lay in could have housed a family, and the room around her belonged in a palace, not a servant's nightmare. Easy. A gentle hand pressed her back against the pillows. Dr. Winters sat beside the bed, but she looked different here, less harried, more confident. You need to rest. My baby. Luna is fine. Dr. Winters smiled. Small, but fierce. Just like her mother, I suspect. Luna? Lyra blinked in confusion. I didn't name her. He did. The doctor's expression softened. Said she was born under the full moon, so Luna fit. I hope you don't mind. He. The mysterious man who'd saved her. Where is she? Dar. Winters gestured to a corner of the room where an elaborate bassinet sat, carved from what looked like a single piece of dark wood. Inside, wrapped in the softest blankets Lyra had ever seen, lay the tiniest baby she could imagine. Luna was perfect, miniature fingers curled in sleep, dark hair so fine it was like silk, and when she briefly opened her eyes, they were the startling blue-green of deep ocean water. She's beautiful, Lyra breathed. She's a fighter. Born 3 months early and still determined to live. Dr. Winters stood, gathering her medical bag. The Alpha wants you both to stay here until Luna is stronger. This wing has everything you'll need. The Alpha? Lyra's heart began to race. I've been moved to the Alpha's wing? His orders were very specific. You're to have round-the-clock care, the finest food, whatever you need for recovery. Dr. Winters paused at the door. He seems quite invested in your well-being, my dear. After the doctor left, Lyra carefully made her way to Luna's bassinet. Her daughter was so small, so fragile. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. If she'd been stronger, eaten better, rested more, maybe Luna would have had more time to grow. I'm sorry, little one, she whispered, gently stroking Luna's cheek with one finger. Mama tried to keep you safe. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A servant she'd never seen before, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, entered carrying a tray that smelled like heaven. Brought you some dinner, miss, the woman said cheerfully. I'm Janet. I'll be helping you while you recover. The tray held more food than Lyra had seen in months, roast chicken with herbs, fresh vegetables, bread that was still warm from the oven, and some kind of rich soup that made her stomach growl audibly. This is too much, Lyra protested. I'm just a servant. Janet's expression shifted slightly. Begging your pardon, miss, but you're under the Alpha's personal protection now. That makes you far more than just a servant. She set the tray on a small table by the windows. Eat up. Doctor's orders, and more importantly, his orders. That evening, as Lyra held Luna and marveled at her daughter's perfect tiny fingers, she noticed something on the nightstand that hadn't been there before. A single white rose, clearly picked from the garden where she'd collapsed, and beside it, a leather-bound book of poetry. There was no note, but she didn't need one. Someone was taking care of them. Someone who wanted to remain anonymous but couldn't resist small gestures of kindness. Over the next few days, the gifts continued. A music box that played soft lullabies when Luna was fussy. A shawl so fine it felt like wearing clouds. Rare books on child-rearing and motherhood. Each item appeared while she slept or was distracted with Luna's care. Finally, curiosity got the better of her. On the back of one of Luna's feeding charts, she wrote a simple message. Thank you for everything. I don't know who you are, but your kindness means more than I can express. Lyra *. She left it on the nightstand beside the empty vase where each day's rose appeared. The next morning, there was a response written in elegant masculine handwriting. Your strength amazes me. Luna is lucky to have such a devoted mother. How are you feeling? Any pain? D*. Her breath caught. D. Darius. The Alpha himself was leaving her gifts, caring for her recovery, asking about her well-being. She wrote back, * much better, thanks to you. Luna grows stronger every day. I wish I could thank you properly, *. His response came that evening, * your recovery is thanks enough. I'm sorry you went through so much alone. No one should face what you faced without support, *. Why, * she wrote. Why are you doing this for us? The answer took 2 days to come, * because everyone deserves protection. Everyone deserves to feel safe. You and Luna deserve better than what you've been given, *. A correspondence began. Her notes grew longer, more personal. She told him about Luna's first smile, about the way her daughter's eyes seemed to track movement now, about her own fears and hopes for the future. His responses revealed glimpses of a man carrying enormous burdens, someone who understood loneliness and loss in ways that made her heart ache. Do you ever wonder what normal feels like, * she wrote one evening. Every day, * came his response. * I remember what it was like before everything changed. Some nights I dream I'm just a man instead of a monster, and I wake up disappointed, *. You're not a monster, * she wrote back immediately. * Monsters don't leave roses for new mothers. They don't ensure premature babies have the best medical care. They don't write poetry recommendations at 2 a.m. because someone mentioned feeling restless, *. You don't know what I am, Lyra. What I've become, asterisk. Then tell me, asterisk. But that note went unanswered. 2 weeks into her recovery, Lyra felt strong enough to take Luna for walks around the private wing. The Alpha's quarters were spectacular, rich furnishings, priceless art, windows that looked out over breathtaking mountain vistas. But they were also empty, echoing with the kind of loneliness that soaked into walls and furniture. It was during one of these walks that she overheard the conversation that changed everything. Getting ridiculous, a female voice was saying. Sharp, bitter, familiar. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, holding Luna closer. The little horse shows up pregnant and suddenly she's living like a queen, another voice agreed. This one belonged to Rebecca, one of the senior maids who'd always looked at Lyra with undisguised contempt. What's next? Is he going to make her Luna of the pack? It's not right, the first voice, Melissa from the kitchens, continued. The rest of us work ourselves to the bone while she sits in silk sheets getting hand-fed like royalty. Something needs to be done about it, Rebecca said, and there was something in her tone that made Lyra's wolf stir uneasily. Alpha or no alpha, she's still just some disgraced beta's daughter. She needs to remember her place. Lyra retreated to her rooms, heart pounding. The jealousy and resentment in their voices had been unmistakable. And dangerous. That night, she wrote to Darius, asterisk some of the servants are unhappy about my treatment. I'm worried about Luna's safety, asterisk. His response was immediate and decisive, asterisk you're both under my personal protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens me. But I'll have Marcus increase security around your wing, asterisk. I don't want to cause trouble, asterisk. You haven't caused anything, Lyra. You survived. You brought new life into this world despite impossible circumstances. If others can't see the strength in that, the fault is theirs, not yours, asterisk. 3 days later, the trouble came anyway. Lyra was alone in her sitting room, Luna napping peacefully in her bassinet, when Rebecca and 2 other servants she didn't recognize entered without knocking. The hostility rolled off them in waves, and Lyra instinctively moved to place herself between them and her daughter. Ladies, she said carefully. Can I help you with something? Oh, we're not ladies anymore, apparently, Rebecca sneered. Not compared to you. Tell me, what exactly did you do to earn such special treatment? Must have been quite the performance. Heat flooded Lyra's cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Don't play innocent. Melissa stepped closer, her eyes hard. We all know what you are. A whore who got pregnant by some rogue and thinks she can waltz in here and take over. I never asked for special treatment. No? Then you won't mind giving it up. Rebecca moved toward Luna's bassinet. Starting with moving back to the servants' quarters where you belong. Don't touch her. Lyra's voice turned deadly quiet, and she felt her wolf stirring, protective instincts flaring. Or what? Rebecca laughed. You'll cry to your mysterious protector? News flash, sweetheart, he's not here. But as she reached for Luna, a low growl filled the room. Not from Lyra, but from the shadows near the doorway. All 4 women turned, and Lyra's breath caught. A massive black wolf stood in the entrance, lips pulled back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers. The wolf from the garden. The same amber eyes that had looked at her with such intensity when she was bleeding and terrified. The other servants screamed and scrambled backward, but the wolf's attention was fixed entirely on Rebecca, who had frozen with her hand halfway to Luna's bassinet. Alpha, Rebecca whispered, her face going white with terror. The wolf's growl deepened, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. He took 1 step forward, then another, and Rebecca stumbled backward so quickly she nearly fell. Without breaking eye contact with the intruders, the wolf moved to stand between them and Luna's bassinet. The message was clear: you do not threaten what is mine. Out. The word came from the wolf's throat, impossibly deep and layered with power that made every window in the room vibrate. Now. They fled. The wolf remained for a long moment, ensuring they were truly gone, before his amber gaze turned to Lyra. She stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe. This close, she could see the scars that crossed his muzzle, the pain that lived behind those ancient eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The wolf's expression softened, just slightly. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows as silently as he'd arrived. That evening, a longer note than usual appeared beside her dinner tray. "I'm sorry you were frightened. Rebecca and the others have been reassigned to other duties. You won't be bothered again. I should have anticipated this. My protection has made you a target, and that was never my intention. I also owe you an explanation. You asked what I am, what I've become. The truth is that 5 years ago, I was infected by something that should have killed me. Instead, it changed me. I can't fully control the shift anymore, can't trust myself around others. I rule from the shadows because the alternative is putting everyone I care about in danger. But I want you to know, you and Luna are safe here. Whatever I've become, whatever monster lives inside me, it recognizes you as pack. As family. That means something, even if I can't be the man who offers it properly. You deserve better than a beast leaving roses and hiding in the dark. Someday, when Luna is older and you're ready to leave this place, I'll make sure you have everything you need for a new start. It's the least I can do. Until then, know that you're protected. Always. D**. Lyra read the note 3 times, tears blurring her vision. Then she picked up her pen and wrote back. You're wrong about one thing. You're not a monster. You're a man who sacrificed everything to save his pack. A man who rescues bleeding strangers and leaves roses for new mothers. A man who writes poetry recommendations and worries about premature babies. I don't want a new start somewhere else. I want to stay here, in this pack, where my daughter can grow up knowing she's wanted and protected. Where she can grow up knowing her alpha is the kind of man who leads from love, not fear. You say you can't be the man who offers protection properly. But you already are that man. You just can't see it yet. Luna and I aren't going anywhere. This is our home now, beast and all. Lyra*. She left the note on the nightstand and settled down to nurse Luna, humming softly as her daughter's tiny fingers gripped hers with surprising strength. Outside, a haunting howl echoed across the mountains, but for the first time, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like hope. Chapter 4. Luna's scream pierced the mountain air as claws raked across her tiny body, and in that moment, something ancient and terrible stirred in the darkness of Ravencrest Manor. Something that had been chained for 5 years was about to break free. It had started so peacefully. Lyra was sitting in the garden with Luna, enjoying the afternoon sunshine while her daughter napped in her carrier. At 3 weeks old, Luna was finally strong enough for short outings, and the fresh air seemed to help her sleep better. She should have seen them coming. The attack came without warning, 5 female wolves shifting mid-stride as they burst from the tree line. Lyra recognized them immediately, Rebecca, Melissa, and 3 others whose resentment had been festering since her protection by the Alpha became common knowledge. Time to end this charade, Rebecca snarled, her wolf form larger and more aggressive than Lyra had expected. You don't belong here. Lyra scrambled to her feet, positioning herself between the wolves and Luna's carrier. Stay back. She's just a baby. Exactly, Melissa's voice was thick with malice as she circled closer. One less problem for the pack to deal with. The first wolf lunged, and Lyra barely managed to dodge, her weakened body still recovering from childbirth. She couldn't shift, not yet, not safely. Her wolf was still too unstable from the pregnancy and trauma. Please, she gasped as another wolf snapped at her legs. If you want to hurt me, fine. But leave Luna alone. The bastard child dies first, Rebecca growled. Then you. Luna woke with a cry that turned into a scream as one of the wolves knocked over her carrier. Lyra dove to catch her daughter, but claws raked across Luna's tiny arm before she could reach her. The baby's blood hit the air, and everything changed. A roar shook the very foundations of the manor, not a wolf's howl, but something far more primal and terrifying. The attacking wolves froze mid-strike, their ears flat against their skulls as an overwhelming presence bore down on them. From the shadows of the manor stepped a figure that made even the bravest wolves whimper in terror. It was Darius, but not as anyone had ever seen him. His body was caught between human and wolf, standing upright but covered in thick black fur. His face was elongated, with a wolf's muzzle and teeth, but human intelligence blazed in eyes that glowed like molten gold. Scars crisscrossed his entire form, deep gouges that looked like they'd been carved by claws the size of daggers. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "You dare," he said, his voice a rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself, "touch what is mine?" The attacking wolves scattered like leaves before a hurricane, but they weren't fast enough. Darius moved with impossible speed, catching Rebecca before she could reach the tree line. She hung from his massive clawed hand like a rag doll. "Alpha, please," she whimpered. You were just attacking a mother and her infant." Each word dripped with deadly intent. "In my territory. Under my protection." He threw her aside like she weighed nothing, his attention already turning to the others. But they were gone, fled into the forest with their tails between their legs. Darius turned back to Lyra, who was clutching Luna to her chest, pressing her hand against the baby's bleeding arm. His monstrous appearance should have terrified her, but all she saw was relief in those golden eyes. "Is she?" His voice had gentled, though it still carried that inhuman rumble. "She's okay," Lyra said quickly, examining the scratches. They were shallow, thank God. Just scared. Luna had stopped crying, her wide blue-green eyes fixed on Darius with what looked like fascination rather than fear. One tiny hand reached toward him, fingers grasping at air. Something in Darius's expression cracked. He took a step back, then another. "I should go," he said roughly. "I shouldn't be, people will see." "Let them see." Lyra stood carefully, Luna still in her arms. "You saved us." "I'm a monster." "You're my hero." The words hung in the air between them. Darius stood frozen, as if no one had ever called him that before. Around them, Lyra could hear voices approaching, pack members drawn by the commotion. "Alpha?" Marcus's voice came from the direction of the manor. "What happened?" "We heard." He stopped short when he saw Darius, his face going pale. "Brother." The way he said it made Lyra's blood run cold. There was no warmth in the word, no family affection. Only calculation. "The situation is handled," Darius said, his posture shifting subtly. Even in his monstrous form, he was putting distance between himself and the approaching pack members. "We should get you inside," Marcus said, moving closer. "Before anyone else sees." But it was too late. Other wolves had arrived, servants, guards, pack members who hadn't seen their alpha in 5 years. Gasps and whispers filled the air as they took in his transformed state. "My God," someone breathed. "What happened to him?" Lyra saw the pain flash across Darius's features, the way he started to retreat back into the shadows. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "He saved my daughter's life," she announced, her voice carrying across the garden. "Your alpha fought off 5 attackers to protect a baby. That's the kind of man he is." The murmurs shifted, becoming something more like awe than horror. Darius looked at her in surprise, and for a moment, she saw past the monstrous exterior to the lonely, broken man beneath. "Come inside," she said softly, meant only for him. "You're bleeding." He was, claw marks across his chest and arms where he'd fought off the attackers. In his haste to protect them, he'd taken several hits. "Lyra," Marcus interrupted, stepping between them. "Perhaps you should take Luna to Dr. Winters. Let me handle the alpha." Something in his tone made her wolf stir uneasily. There was an undercurrent there, something possessive and wrong. "I can tend to his wounds," she said firmly. "It's the least I can do." Marcus's eyes flashed with what looked like anger before his expression smoothed. "Of course." I'll escort you both inside. But Darius was already shaking his head. I'll go to my own quarters. Alone. The finality in his voice brooked no argument. He turned and walked back toward the manor, his monstrous form moving with a grace that should have been impossible. Wait, Lyra called after him. You're hurt. He paused without turning around. I heal fast. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the manor like he'd never been there at all. Well, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. That was quite something. Dar. Winters fussed over Luna's minor scratches while Lyra sat in the medical suite, her mind racing. The attack had been vicious, coordinated. And Marcus's reaction to seeing Darius. She'll be fine, Dr. Winters assured her, applying a tiny bandage to Luna's arm. Barely broke the skin. She was very lucky. We both were. Lyra looked up as Marcus entered the medical suite. If the Alpha hadn't come when he did. Yes, well, Darius has always been protective of pack members. Marcus's tone was carefully casual. Especially the vulnerable ones. Something about the way he said vulnerable made her skin crawl. Dr. Winters, Marcus continued, would you mind giving us a moment? I'd like to speak with Lyra privately. The doctor glanced between them, then nodded reluctantly. I'll be just outside if you need anything. When they were alone, Marcus moved closer, his demeanor shifting subtly. Gone was the careful protectiveness he'd shown her over the past few weeks. In its place was something harder, more calculating. That was quite a display of loyalty, he said. Defending the Alpha's appearance like that. He saved my daughter's life. Yes, he did. And in doing so, he revealed himself to the entire pack. Marcus sat down across from her, his gray eyes sharp. That changes things. What do you mean? I mean that my brother's condition is no longer a secret. The pack will have questions. Concerns about his ability to lead. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Some might even question whether he's fit to be Alpha at all. The way he said it made her blood run cold. You're his beta. His brother. Shouldn't you be supporting him? Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've been supporting him for 5 years, Lyra. Keeping his secret, running the pack in his absence, making sure no one questioned his authority. But there are limits to what even family loyalty can accomplish. He's still your Alpha. Is he? Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Look at what he's become. Half-beast, unstable, unable to control his transformations. The pack deserves better. Something clicked in Lyra's mind, a memory that had been buried under trauma and survival. Marcus's scent, familiar in a way that had always bothered her. The way he'd looked at her that first day in the garden. The calculated kindness that had never quite felt genuine. It was you, she breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. You're Luna's father. Marcus went very still. Excuse me? The rogue who got me pregnant. It wasn't some random wolf. Her voice was getting stronger, more certain. It was you. You came to Crimson Moon territory, seduced the beta's daughter, and left. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made her want to run. Clever girl, he said softly. I wondered if you'd figure it out eventually. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you do that? Because I needed leverage. Marcus stood, beginning to pace the small room. Darius has no heirs, no mate, no children. If something were to happen to him, I would be next in line to lead the pack. But illegitimate children have a way of complicating succession, don't they? The full scope of his plan hit her like a sledgehammer. You wanted me pregnant and disgraced so my father would send me away. You wanted Luna born here, where you could. Where I could eliminate any potential claims to leadership, Marcus finished. Yes, exactly. A tragic accident during childbirth, perhaps. These things happen with premature babies. But I survived. Luna survived. An unexpected complication. But not an insurmountable one. His eyes glittered with malice. Today's attack, for instance. If my brother hadn't intervened, the problem would have solved itself. Horror washed over her. You arranged the attack. I may have mentioned to certain pack members that you were getting ideas above your station. That the Alpha's protection was making you forget your place. Marcus shrugged. I didn't expect them to go after the baby directly, but desperate wolves do desperate things. Lyra clutched Luna tighter, her mind racing. Marcus had orchestrated everything, her pregnancy, her exile, the attacks. All to position himself to take over the pack. You won't get away with this, she said. Won't I? Marcus moved closer, his scent carrying the threat of violence. Who's going to stop me? Darius? He can barely control his own transformations, let alone run a pack. The pack members? They just saw their Alpha in his true form for the first time. Half of them will be calling for his removal by morning. I'll tell them the truth. Will you? Marcus's smile turned predatory. And what truth is that? That their beta seduced and abandoned a 19-year-old girl? That I orchestrated attacks on pack members? Do you have proof, Lyra? Witnesses? Or just the word of a disgraced ex-beta's daughter against the man who's been effectively running this pack for 5 years? She opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right. She had nothing but suspicions and recovered memories. Besides, Marcus continued, think about Luna. She's safe here as long as no one knows who her father really is. But if you start making accusations... He let the threat hang in the air. You're her father, Lyra whispered. You wouldn't hurt your own daughter. Marcus's laugh was cold. Bastard children have been inconvenient to ambitious men for centuries, my dear. I won't let sentiment cloud my judgment. The door opened, and Dr. Winters returned. Sorry to interrupt, but Luna's getting fussy. She might need to nurse. Marcus immediately shifted back to his concerned beta persona. Of course. Lyra's had quite a shock. Perhaps she should rest. As Dar. Winters fussed over Luna. Marcus leaned close to Lyra's ear. Think carefully about what we've discussed, he murmured. Your daughter's safety depends on your discretion. After he left, Lyra sat in the medical suite, her mind spinning. She was trapped. Marcus held all the cards, power, position, the trust of the pack. And Luna was the perfect leverage to ensure her silence. But as she looked down at her daughter's innocent face, she made a silent promise. Somehow, some way, she would find a way to protect Luna and expose Marcus for what he really was. She just had to figure out how to do it without getting them both killed in the process. That night, she wrote a note and left it on her nightstand. I know who you really are now. And I know who Marcus really is. We need to talk. The response came quickly, written in that familiar elegant hand, tomorrow night. The North Tower. Come alone, and tell no one. Some truths are too dangerous for daylight. Lyra pressed the note to her chest and looked out at the mountains beyond her window. Tomorrow, she would finally meet the beast who had been protecting her. And together, they would figure out how to stop the real monster lurking in the shadows of Ravencrest Manor. Chapter 5. The knife pressed against Luna's throat caught the moonlight like a sliver of ice, and Marcus's voice carried the cold finality of a man with nothing left to lose. One more step, Lyra, and your bastard dies. She froze in the doorway of the North Tower, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd come here to meet Darius, to finally confront the truth about Marcus's betrayal. Instead, she'd walked into a trap. Hello, my dear, Marcus said softly, his arm wrapped around Luna's tiny body. Her daughter was awake, blue-green eyes wide with confusion but not yet fear. She was too young to understand the danger. Right on time. Let her go. Lyra forced her voice to remain steady. This is between you and me. Oh, but it's not. Marcus shifted slightly, and the blade caught the light again. You see, I've realized my mistake. I thought I could control you with threats, manipulate you into silence. But you're too much like your mother. Stubborn, principled, inconveniently brave. Marcus. Darius's voice came from the shadows behind Lyra, deep and rough with barely controlled rage. Release the child. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. There he is. The great Alpha King, come to rescue his pet and her whelp. His eyes glittered with malice. Tell me, brother, does she know the truth about what you've become? Does she know you're dying? Lyra spun to look at Darius, who had emerged from the stairwell. Even in the moonlight, she could see the pain etched into his features, the way he favored his left side. The curse is killing you, she breathed. That's why you've been hiding. Very good, Marcus said mockingly. Yes, the curse is quite ingenious, if I do say so myself. Slow enough that it took years to take effect, painful enough to drive him to isolation, and ultimately fatal. I calculated he had maybe 6 months left. You did this to him. The words came out flat, emotionless. Your own brother. My own brother who never deserved to lead. Marcus's grip on Luna tightened, and the baby made a small sound of distress. I was older, stronger, more ambitious. But no, father chose the noble son, the one with the kind heart and protective instincts. Darius took a step forward, his eyes glowing amber in the darkness. This is between us, Marcus. Let Lyra and Luna go. I don't think so. The knife pressed closer to Luna's neck. You see, they're the perfect leverage. Kill them, and you'll go mad with grief, making it easy to put you out of your misery. Keep them alive, and I can use them to control you for however long you have left. Lyra felt something stirring inside her chest, not her wolf, but something else. Something warm and bright and powerful. It had been growing stronger ever since Luna's birth, ever since she'd started corresponding with Darius. Now it pulsed through her veins like liquid starlight. There's a third option, she said quietly. Both brothers looked at her. Darius with concern, Marcus with irritation. Oh. And what's that? I heal him. The words came out with absolute certainty, even though she'd never consciously known she possessed such abilities. I break your curse and restore him to full strength. Marcus's laugh was harsh. Heal him? You're not even a trained medic, let alone. I'm his mate. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Marcus went very still, his eyes darting between her and Darius. That's impossible, he said slowly. The mating bond only forms between equals, Lyra finished. Two souls meant to be together. Two halves of the same whole. She could feel it now, the invisible thread connecting her to Darius, growing stronger with each passing second. That's why your curse is failing, isn't it? That's why he's not dead yet. The bond has been protecting him. Darius stared at her in wonder. Lyra. But the bond works both ways, she continued, never taking her eyes off Marcus. Which means I can channel my strength into him. I can heal what you broke. No. Marcus's voice turned deadly. I won't let you. He moved the knife, but Lyra was already in motion. The power inside her chest exploded outward, not as an attack but as pure healing energy. It slammed into Darius like a wave of golden light, and she felt his pain as if it were her own, 5 years of agony, isolation, and slow death. She also felt his love. Raw, desperate, all-consuming love that had been growing since the moment he'd found her bleeding in the garden. It poured into her through their bond, giving her strength even as she gave him hers. Marcus cursed and lunged toward them, but the healing had already begun. Darius's form rippled and changed, the curse-twisted features smoothing back into human proportions. His scars faded, his strength returned, and when he opened his eyes, they blazed with the power of a true Alpha King. Impossible, Marcus breathed, backing away with Luna still in his arms. Your mistake, Darius said, his voice now clear and strong, was assuming I was fighting your curse alone. He moved with fluid grace, no longer hindered by pain or weakness. But I had her. Even before I knew what she was to me, I had her. The mating bond snapped fully into place with an almost audible click, and Lyra gasped as their souls merged completely. She could feel everything he felt, his love, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute certainty that she was his perfect match in every way that mattered. This ends now, Darius said, taking another step toward Marcus. Yes, Marcus agreed, raising the knife. It does. But before he could bring the blade down, a new voice cut through the night air. Marcus Ravencrest, you are under arrest for treason against the pack. Everyone turned. Marcus Blackwood, Lyra's father, stood in the doorway with 6 armed wolves behind him. His amber eyes, so like her own, took in the scene with cold calculation. Father? Lyra stared at him in shock. What are you doing here? Cleaning up a mess that should have been handled months ago. His gaze moved to Darius, and Lyra saw something like respect in his expression. Alpha King. We received word that your beta was planning a coup. We came to offer assistance. Marcus laughed bitterly. How convenient. The great Marcus Blackwood arrives just in time to play hero. His grip on Luna shifted slightly. Tell me, old friend, did you know your daughter was mated to the Alpha King when you sent her here? Or was that just a happy accident? Lyra saw her father's face go pale. Mated? The bond between her and Darius was visible now, threads of silver light connecting their hearts, pulsing with shared energy. There was no hiding what they were to each other. Your daughter, Marcus continued with malicious glee, has become the most powerful Luna in the territories. The political alliance you always dreamed of, and you threw it away for the sake of your precious reputation. For a moment, true anguish flashed across her father's face. Then his expression hardened. I made my choice. Now I'll live with it. How noble, Marcus sneered. But it doesn't change anything. I still have the child, and I'm still leaving here tonight. No, Lyra said firmly. You're not. She stepped forward, and this time she didn't hide the power flowing through her. It made the air shimmer around her, made her eyes glow with inner light. She was no longer the broken, pregnant girl who'd been cast out in shame. She was a Luna, an Alpha's mate, a mother protecting her child. Luna belongs to this pack now, she said, her voice carrying the authority of her new position. And this pack protects its own. Marcus's hand tightened on the knife, but before he could move, Darius was there. Moving faster than the eye could follow, he caught Marcus's wrist and twisted. The knife clattered to the floor, and Luna was suddenly in Lyra's arms, safe and unharmed. Marcus crumbled to his knees, his wrist obviously broken. This isn't over. Yes, Darius said quietly, it is. The Blackwood wolves moved forward to restrain Marcus, but Lyra's father hung back, his eyes fixed on his daughter. Lyra, he said finally. I came here to make amends. To bring you home. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his own choices. This is my home now, she said simply. These are my people. Marcus Blackwood's face crumpled slightly. I know. I know I have no right to ask, but, can you forgive an old fool who let pride cloud his judgment? Lyra considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, his rejection had nearly destroyed her. Now, standing beside her mate with their daughter in her arms and a pack to protect, his opinion seemed less important. I can forgive you, she said finally. But I won't forget. And I won't pretend that what you did was anything less than cruel. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. Much more, Darius agreed coldly. But his hand found Lyra's, their fingers intertwining. However, my mate is generous. You may visit, occasionally, if you can behave yourself. It was a dismissal, polite but final. Marcus Blackwood had lost the right to play father the night he'd cast his daughter out. Now he would have to earn even the smallest place in her life. As the Blackwood wolves escorted Marcus away, the treacherous Beta, not her father, Lyra found herself alone with Darius in the tower. Luna had fallen asleep in her arms, exhausted by the evening's excitement. "So," she said softly. "We're mates." "We are." Darius moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. "I should have told you sooner, but I wasn't sure you'd want a monster for a mate." "You're not a monster. You never were." She leaned into his touch, marveling at how right it felt. "You're the man who saved us, who protected us, who left roses and wrote poetry recommendations. And you're the woman who healed my soul before you ever touched my body." His thumb traced across her cheekbone. "The woman who saw strength where others saw shame, who chose to stay when she could have left." "Where else would I go?" Lyra smiled. "This is where my family is." Luna stirred in her arms, making a small sound that might have been agreement. Her daughter would grow up here, in this pack, knowing she was wanted and loved and valued. She would never know the shame that had defined Lyra's own childhood. "What happens now?" Lyra asked. "Now we rebuild." Darius's arms came around both her and Luna, holding them close. "We change the old ways, make this pack a place where strength is measured by compassion instead of cruelty. We teach Luna that power comes with responsibility, and that the greatest leaders are those who serve their people." "And us?" "Us?" His smile was soft, full of promise. "We love each other, raise our daughter, and show the world that true strength comes from partnership, not domination." Outside the tower windows, dawn was beginning to break over the mountains. A new day, a new beginning. Lyra looked out over the Ravencrest territory, her territory now, and felt a deep sense of belonging settle into her bones. She was no longer Marcus Blackwood's discarded daughter or a servant grateful for scraps of kindness. She was Lyra Ravencrest, Luna of the most powerful pack in the territories, mother to the future heir, and mate to a king who ruled with wisdom instead of fear. She had found her strength in the shadows, and now she would use it to bring light to her new world. "I love you," she whispered against Darius's lips. "And I love you," he whispered back. "My queen of shadows. My perfect match." Luna made another small sound, and they both looked down at her. She was awake now, staring up at them with those startling blue-green eyes that seemed far too wise for such a young face. "I think she approves," Lyra said with a laugh. "Good," Darius said, pressing a kiss to Luna's forehead. "Because she's going to be stuck with us for a very long time." Outside, the Ravencrest wolves were already gathering in the courtyard, drawn by the news that their alpha had returned to them whole and strong. They would have questions, concerns, adjustments to make. But for now, in this moment, Lyra was content to stand with her family and watch the sun rise over their kingdom. She had chosen love over revenge, healing over hatred, and in doing so, she had found something more precious than any crown. She had found home. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.